For nearly 3 decades, one victim was known only by a peach tattoo. By 2025, she had a real name, and the investigation branched in a direction that forced the entire Gilgo files to be reconsidered. This account summarizes the developments as publicly disclosed by law enforcement authorities. Any details not yet confirmed will be clearly identified as allegations or unresolved questions. The story unfolds along 3 main threads. First, the broader context of the Gilgo Beach investigations that captured national attention. Second, the specific branch involving the victim known as Peaches and an unidentified young child. Third, the DNA breakthrough in 2025 that gave both victims their identities back, followed by an arrest that raised fundamental questions about how we understand this complex case. Throughout this narrative, no conclusions will be drawn beyond what has been officially charged or adjudicated. The stretch of coastline along Long Island's southern shore became a focal point in American true crime after the discovery of multiple sets of human remains throughout the early 2010s. The area near Gilgo Beach, particularly along Ocean Parkway, emerged as a location where investigators found evidence of multiple victims over several years. What captured public's attention was not just the grim discoveries themselves, but the questions they raised about patterns, connections, and whether a single perpetrator might be responsible. Law enforcement officials have consistently noted an important caveat in their public statements. Not every victim found in proximity to this area necessarily fell prey to the same individual. The geographic clustering of remains does not automatically indicate a unified series of crimes. This distinction becomes crucial when examining what became known as the Peaches branch of the investigation. The central question that emerges is whether this particular case represents part of a larger pattern or stands as an independent tragedy that happened to intersect with the same location. The victim, who would carry the nickname Peaches for more than 20 years, received that designation for a simple reason. When partial remains were discovered in June 1997 at Hempstead Lake State Park in Lakeview, Long Island, investigators found a distinctive peach tattoo. In the absence of any identification, that tattoo became the only marker by which she could be referenced. The case stretched back to the late 1990s, a time when the forensic tools that would eventually break it open did not yet exist in practical form. Without a name, with minimal evidence, and with investigative technology still developing, the file remained open but largely dormant. The victim existed in records and in the memories of investigators, but her identity remained locked away. She was someone's daughter, possibly someone's mother, certainly someone who mattered to people who never stopped wondering what happened. Yet, for investigation purposes, she could only be referred to by that single identifying mark, a peach inked into skin that outlasted everything else. Years later, during the intensive search operations connected to other Gilgo area discoveries between 2010 and 2011, investigators found additional remains. These included more remains connected to the woman with the peach tattoo discovered along Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach. In the same general area, they also found the remains of a young child approximately 2 years old. The proximity of these discoveries to the broader Gilgo investigation meant they became linked in the public consciousness and in investigative documentation. However, it is essential to understand what linked means in this context. The remains were found in geographic proximity during related search operations. This created an investigative connection, a reason to examine whether patterns existed. But investigative connection does not equal definitive conclusion about a common perpetrator. The phrase that appears repeatedly in official statements is that these cases should not be automatically grouped together simply because of location. The investigation into what happened to Peaches and the child found with her remains proceeded on its own trajectory, even as it shared file space with the broader Gilgo cases. The breakthrough that would finally answer the question of identity came through a technology that has revolutionized cold case investigation across the country. Genetic genealogy combines DNA analysis with family tree research, allowing investigators to work backward from genetic material to potential family members and from there to the identity of unknown victims. The process involves extracting viable DNA, comparing it against databases of genetic information, building family trees, and gradually narrowing the possibilities until a name emerges. In April 2025, specifically on April 23rd, the Nassau County Police Department made a significant announcement. The woman known as Peaches for nearly 3 decades was identified as Tanya Denise Jackson. She was 26 years old at the time of her death and had served in the United States military. The young child found in proximity to her remains was identified as Tatiana Marie Dykes, her daughter approximately 2 years old. After 28 years, both victims had their real names restored. The emotional weight of this identification extends beyond the mechanics of forensic science. Returning a name to someone is not merely an administrative act. It represents a fundamental recognition of humanity, a restoration of dignity that death and time had obscured. For families and communities, a name allows for proper mourning, for closure of a particular kind, even if justice remains to be determined. For investigators, a name opens pathways. It provides connections, histories, relationships that can be traced and examined. The identification of Tanya Denise Jackson and Tatiana Marie Dykes did exactly that. The genetic analysis that identified mother and child also revealed other connections. Through the same genealogical investigation, authorities identified a biological relationship that would prove central to the subsequent criminal case. The evidence indicated that a man named Andrew Dykes was the biological father of Tatiana Marie Dykes. This information, combined with other investigative work, not fully detailed in public reports, led authorities to focus their attention on Dykes as a suspect. In early December 2025, law enforcement executed an arrest. Andrew Dykes, age 66, was taken into custody in Tampa, Florida, on a warrant issued by Nassau County, New York. He has been charged in connection with the deaths of Tanya Denise Jackson and Tatiana Marie Dykes. According to publicly released information, he is alleged to be the biological father of the child. The specific charges and the detailed evidence supporting them have not been fully disclosed in the public record as of this writing, as is typical during the early stages of prosecution. On December 4, 2025, Dykes appeared in court in Florida for initial proceedings. The legal process of extradition to New York was initiated to allow for prosecution in the jurisdiction where the alleged crimes occurred. At this stage of legal proceedings, it is crucial to maintain the distinction between accusation and conviction. Dykes has been arrested and charged. He has not been convicted. Under the American legal system, an accused person is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. The allegations will be tested through the judicial process, and only at the conclusion of that process, if a conviction is obtained, can definitive legal conclusions be drawn. The specifics of what allegedly happened in 1990s have not been detailed in public reporting at this level of specificity. Motive, if it is addressed at trial, will be presented through evidence and testimony in the appropriate legal setting. What we know from official sources is limited to the fact of the charges, the relationship alleged between the accused and the victims, and the general time frame. Speculation beyond these established facts serves no constructive purpose and risks prejudicing legal proceedings or causing additional harm to affected families. One detail explicitly noted by investigators deserves particular emphasis. Authorities have stated that they have not found any connection between Andrew Dykes and Rex Heuermann. Heuermann is the individual who has been charged in connection with other victims in the Gilgo Beach case files. This statement is significant because it underscores the principle mentioned earlier. Geographic proximity of where remains are discovered does not automatically indicate a single perpetrator. The Peaches branch appears, based on current official information, to be separate from the cases in which Heuermann has been charged. This separation has important implications for how we understand the broader Gilgo investigation. The public and media often approach such cases looking for unified narratives, for a single explanation that ties everything together. There is something psychologically satisfying about a complete pattern, a story where all the pieces fit into one clear picture. However, criminal investigation frequently reveals a more complex reality. Multiple tragedies can occur in proximity, either through coincidence or through other factors that draw criminal activity to particular locations without necessarily being the work of one individual. The arrest of Andrew Dykes strengthens the interpretation that the Gilgo area discoveries represent multiple independent cases rather than a single coordinated series. This does not make the crimes less serious or the victims less deserving of justice. If anything, it emphasizes that each case, each victim deserves individual attention and investigation based on specific evidence rather than assumptions about patterns. For families who have waited decades for answers, the DNA breakthrough represents a form of justice in itself, even before any trial verdict. Tanya Denise Jackson and Tatiana Marie Dykes are no longer anonymous. They have been restored to their families, their histories acknowledged. This does not erase their deaths or fully heal the wounds left behind, but it provides what one investigator called a minimal form of justice, the justice of recognition and truth. The case also highlights the evolution of forensic science and investigative techniques. What was impossible to determine in 1997 became solvable in 2025. DNA technology combined with genealogical databases and sophisticated analysis created possibilities that did not exist when these crimes were first committed. Other cold cases across the country have seen similar resolutions, and more are likely to follow as the technology continues to develop and as more people contribute their genetic information to databases that can be used for these purposes. There are important questions about privacy and consent in this realm, questions that society continues to grapple with. But in the context of identifying victims and potentially solving violent crimes, the technology has proven invaluable. It gives voice to the silent names, to the nameless, and in doing so, opens pathways to accountability that might otherwise have remained permanently closed. Several questions remain open at this stage of the legal process. The complete sequence of events in 1997 has not been publicly detailed. Whether there are additional victims who might be connected to the accused is a question that presumably investigators have examined, though no public statements have been made, suggesting additional charges at this time. What will be revealed through the prosecution in New York remains to be seen. Court proceedings will likely provide additional information, though some details may remain sealed or restricted for various legal reasons. As this case moves forward through the judicial system, updates will come through official channels. Responsible coverage and discussion should rely on these official sources rather than speculation or rumor. The stakes are too high and the potential for harm too great to approach this case or any similar case with anything less than rigorous attention to verified facts and appropriate legal standards. The Peaches branch of the Gilgo investigation reveals an important truth about complex criminal cases. Sometimes location causes separate cases to be read as a series to be bundled together in public understanding and even in investigative files. But forensic science patient investigation and careful analysis can separate these stories into their individual tragedies, each deserving its own investigation, its own accounting, its own resolution. The identification of Tanya Denise Jackson and Tatiana Marie Dykes and the subsequent arrest of Andrew Dykes represents a significant development, not just in one case, but in our understanding of the larger Gilgo picture. It reminds us that apparent patterns may be more complicated than they first appear. It demonstrates the power of modern forensic techniques to solve cases that seemed hopelessly cold, and it underscores the ongoing commitment of investigators to pursue justice even when decades have passed. For those who follow true crime cases, whether out of general interest or deeper concern for victims' rights and justice, the lesson here is clear. Approach each development with appropriate skepticism and caution. Distinguish between what has been officially established and what remains speculation. Respect the legal process and the presumption of innocence, while also honoring the memory of victims. And remember that behind every case file, every set of remains, every DNA sample, there are real people whose lives and deaths deserve to be treated with dignity and care. The legal proceedings against Andrew Dykes will unfold in the months and years ahead. Whatever verdicts are eventually reached, the identification of Tanya and Tatiana stands as an achievement in itself. They are no longer peaches and baby doe. They are known. They are remembered by their real names, and that in a world where so many remain unknown represents progress toward justice and truth. This case reminds us of a fundamental principle that sustains civil society. The rule of law demands patience, even when every instinct cries out for immediate answers and swift justice. We must resist the urge to convict in the court of public opinion before evidence has been properly tested in a court of law. At the same time, we must never forget that behind every case number and every legal proceeding are human beings whose lives were cut short, families left with decades of unanswered questions, and communities grappling with loss and fear. The balance between protecting the rights of the accused and honoring the dignity of victims is not always comfortable, but it is essential to a justice system that serves everyone. If you found this account informative, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. Please keep your perspective grounded in the facts as they have been officially reported, respecting both the ongoing legal process and the memory of Tanya Denise Jackson and Tatiana Marie Dykes. If you would like to follow further developments in this case or explore other mysterious and haunting criminal investigations that have shaped American true crime history, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your engagement helps ensure that these stories are told responsibly, that victims are remembered with dignity, and that the pursuit of truth and justice remains at the center of how we understand these complex human tragedies.